It's a gorgeous morning, and it's been a little cool, but that's a break from all the heat we've had over the past few months. In fact, it's since about March or April. So I know there are those who are really enjoying this cool weather. I kind of like it a little on the warm side, but this is a very nice day. So hope you're having a good day. I hope you're getting ready for a good weekend. We are at the table, and it's always a good weekend when we gather around Word and Sacrament. We do that every Sunday at 10:30 at the Los Fresnos Community Center. And if you've never been there with us, I encourage you, spend some time with us on Sunday and join us. It's always a great time celebrating Jesus, celebrating who he is and what he's done for us. And we do that every week at the table. We've been in the Bible Binge for the past year. We're going to be in the Bible Binge on Sunday again. We're going to be in the book of Jonah. We're making our way from Genesis to Revelation. We've been at this for about a year, and it's going to last us for another 6 weeks or so. But we're coming toward the end. And in our Bible Binge, which is a Bible reading program, by the way, and if you want a bookmark, I'll get you a bookmark. Today's reading is a book called Zephaniah. And again, all this week, we've been in books that we typically don't read. It's not like the first thing, when we pick up our Bibles, it's not the first thing that we are running for. And I can't remember the last time I picked up my Bible and just ran to the book of Zephaniah. But there is one. By the way, we're going to talk about that tomorrow. This is actually the beginning of two parts. So we're going to do a little bit of Zephaniah today and then a little bit of Zephaniah tomorrow, because we're talking about a very interesting thing that's going on in Zephaniah. Zephaniah is an interesting book, and so we're going to take some time, just a little bit of time, to talk about what's going on. Zephaniah is one of the 12 at the end of our Old Testaments. As we move into the New Testament, there's a break between Malachi and Matthew, and we have 12 books, 12 small books in the Western world. We've called them the minor prophets. There's really nothing minor about them other than that their books are smaller than the biggies, which are Isaiah, Jeremiah, and Ezekiel. But they weren't minor prophets. They were actually just as major as the big three in terms of the scope of their ministry and their influence when they lived. It's, again, minor because their books are small. Zephaniah has 3 chapters, or it's divided into 3 chapters. In our American Bibles, and those 3 chapters have a lot in them. Zephaniah is unique. He was around the same time as Jeremiah, which would make him around the same time as Habakkuk, and Habakkuk is probably a little earlier, but still relatively the same time. They're looking at Babylon as the big bad. Babylon conquers Assyria during that time. Assyria had been the world power, and the closer you get to 600 BC, Babylon has become the world power. And so Zephaniah is kind of in that time frame. The 12 tribes of Israel are no longer 12 tribes. The 10 tribes of the 10 northern tribes, they've been carted off. They've been removed by Assyria. And that leaves the last 2, which we call the kingdom of Judah and Jerusalem. That leaves the last 2. And Zephaniah has his words for Jerusalem and Judah. What sticks out with his prophecies, and again, he's like the rest of them. If you start reading the prophets and you start reading Isaiah and Jeremiah and Ezekiel, and you start to make your way through the 12, it really is a lot of judgment language, because the prophets were raised up to call Israel and call Judah to repentance and talk to them about the coming destruction, whether it was at the hands of Assyria or, in Zephaniah's case, at the hands of Babylon. So there's a lot of judgment language, and Zephaniah is no different. What makes Zephaniah unique, though, among the 12, and even probably more so than Ezekiel, is the language he is using is absolutely catastrophic. Few prophecies or few sermons in the Old Testament are going to be as graphic and as bad and as absolute as Zephaniah. Even in these 3 short chapters, we get a sense of how catastrophic and how destructive and how devastating the coming judgment is for Jerusalem. So the opening verses are a summary of Zephaniah's prophet. Here's the scope. It's in terms of creation, by the way. God says this through Zephaniah: I will completely sweep away everything from the face of the earth. This is the Lord's declaration. I will sweep away people and animals. I will sweep away the birds of the sky, the fish of the sea, and the ruins along with the wicked. I will cut off mankind from the face of the earth. This is the Lord's declaration. I am going to cut off. I'm going to sweep away. In fact, I'm going to sweep away people and animals. I'm going to sweep away the birds and the fish. Where have we seen this language before? If you're a student of the Old Testament, or if you've been to some of the Sunday school classes, or you've heard the preaching, this is flood language. This is the universal flood of Genesis and Noah's Ark. And now it's being applied to Jerusalem. That's how catastrophic it's going to be. I'm going to sweep everything away. It's being applied to Jerusalem. What happened at the flood? That's going to happen to Jerusalem. That's how bad and catastrophic and total it's going to be. This is breathtaking. The judgment is not coming just for the people of Jerusalem, but for everything in Jerusalem, including the animals. They're going to feel the pain of God's judgment against his people, and the judgment's going to be total. It's going to be everything, and we're going to get to how bad it is here in a second. But we're supposed to feel this. All of creation is going to be affected by what's going to happen to Jerusalem through Babylon. And if you keep reading Jeremiah, the charges against Jerusalem, they're pretty much the same. The charges are, you've been worshiping other gods, you've been chasing after false idols. Here in Zephaniah, it's termed as Baal, which again is kind of a broad definition of the gods of the ancient Near East, especially the ancient Near East of the nations around Israel and Judah and Jerusalem there. But Baal's been a problem for Israel ever since they conquered the Promised Land, hundreds of years earlier. And Baal's just a constant problem. They're constantly chasing after Baal. They're constantly chasing after the women that are part of that whole system. And here in Zephaniah, it sounds like he's saying, Baal's not just out there, and it's not just worship here. You've even brought Baal's big theologians here to Jerusalem. Jerusalem's a mecca for Baal worship. Are you kidding? No wonder God's talking about total destruction, because Jerusalem's become a mecca for the very thing that God had warned them about, and worshiping false gods. And so that's why destruction is coming. There's a little more to it than this when we're talking about the totality of the devastation that's coming. One interesting thing about Zephaniah, and I do this from time to time even in my own Bible, when you're reading through Zephaniah and these very short books, circle every time you see the word day or the word time, because that's really the running theme. Zephaniah is, if you're going to look at, there are other people that are talking about the day in the prophets, but Zephaniah, in just 3 short passages, he's talking about all the time. In fact, his whole thing is about this day. And we're talking about the day of the Lord. The day of the Lord, in terms of how Israel understood it throughout history, the day of the Lord is a phrase that shows up throughout the entire Old Testament. And it's always pointing forward to something really big, bad, and terrible that is coming. Now, typically, we think about this big, bad, and terrible day of the Lord coming as being at the end of time, when the entire world is going to be completely destroyed. But you have this language showing up in Zephaniah. You have this language showing up in some of the other prophets. But again, Zephaniah is really going in after this one. So this coming destruction and devastation to Jerusalem is in terms of the day of the Lord. They are going to get their day of the Lord. And the day of the Lord is going to land on Jerusalem. And it's going to be big. It's going to be bad. It's going to be at the hands of the Babylonians. That's how catastrophic and total the devastation and destruction is going to be. It's going to be like they are in the day of the Lord. Nothing's going to be left untouched. But the day of the Lord isn't simply, again, the end of the world. It's going to be this for Jerusalem. And it points to a problem, even on our terms. So today and tomorrow, we're kind of myth-busting this whole day of the Lord bit. And the first thing we need to see is it's not simply at the end of time. It's not simply somewhere down the road. And it's not simply something that is kind of in the abstract. It's actually in the time and space. It's in the here and now. And for Jerusalem then, it was just a matter of weeks, years, and very short years coming. Because Babylon is getting ready to descend on Jerusalem and wipe it out. That is the day of the Lord for them. So one of the problems that we're looking at here as we read Zephaniah that comes to the fore is day of the Lord isn't simply some day down the road, it's right now. And for them, it was right then. But there's also another side to the day of the Lord that we can't miss. And again, when we typically think about day of the Lord, especially in our American Christianity here, it's always in terms of destruction. It's always in terms of devastation, and you certainly have that here in Zephaniah. But in chapter 3, Zephaniah is going to give Israel hope. And you paint the hope against the backdrop and against all the coming destruction, and you've got this contrast that is a stark contrast. As bad as the destruction is going to be, and as devastating and as catastrophic and as global as it's going to be, well, here you have something that is hope, and the hope is as grand and glorious as the destruction is bad. This is what Zephaniah says. Here's his hope. And this is promised language. I will restore pure speech to the peoples, so that all of them may call on the name of the Lord. So you have this calling on the name of the Lord. We're not going to spend time on this, but that's also all part of this, calling on the name of the Lord. It shows up in the New Testament. It is the expression of hearts that have been captured by the promise of coming one in the Old Testament, the promise that we have in Jesus. But then God says this through Zephaniah. On that day, it will be said to Jerusalem, do not fear. Zion, do not let your hands grow weak. At that time, I will deal with all who oppress you. I will save the lame and gather the outcasts. At that time, I will bring you back. Yes, at the time, I will gather you. So here he's saying, I'm going to take care of those who've oppressed you. I'm going to give you salvation on that day. The very same language that had been used by Zephaniah to talk about the day of the Lord. On that day, Jerusalem is going to be destroyed. On that day, I will restore everything. You see, there's a new creation coming. And it's being promised here in the same kind of language as the destruction. You see, Day of the Lord isn't simply about destruction. Day of the Lord is about salvation. The Day of the Lord is about new creation. There is hope in the Day of the Lord, in that language. The Day of the Lord is salvation for God's people. The Day of the Lord is something to look forward to because it's the day of renewal and restoration. A lot of good stuff. It's when the promise is fulfilled and realized. And again, this language is just as universal. And we've experienced that, you and I. The new creation has come. And we are part of it. The day of the Lord has come and has made us into his people. You see, the day of the Lord has broken into our reality. And it's broken into our brokenness. And it provides us forgiveness and salvation in the midst of the mess. You see, along the way, Jesus is also, or Zephaniah is also saying this. And we hear this language in the New Testament, especially in the biographies of Jesus. I will save the lame on that day. I'm going to save the lame. I'm going to save the outcasts on that day. Again, that's language talking about Jesus. So Jesus shows up. He is healing the lame. He's saving the lame. He is there for the outcasts on that day. See, Jesus is ushering the day of the Lord himself. And as he ushers in the day of the Lord, there is a new creation. There is salvation as Jesus comes on that day. And he's walking into the brokenness. And as he did it then, he does it for us. He walks into our brokenness. He walks into our mess. He walks into our pain. He walks into our hurt. And he provides us with rest and peace and salvation on our day. That is our day. Now we're going to continue this discussion of just what it means, what the day of the Lord means tomorrow, because there's more here. There is more here in Zephaniah about what we're talking about when it comes to the day of the Lord. So today and tomorrow we're going to be myth busting a bit. It's not just simply damnation and destruction. The day of the Lord is something really good. Really good. Salvation for us. That's our conversation at the table from Zephaniah. We'll be back in Zephaniah tomorrow. So I encourage you between now and then, read up. Read those 3 chapters. And you might see what we're talking about. What are we talking about tomorrow when it comes to the day of the Lord? Anyway, I hope you enjoy your Friday. I hope you enjoy the beginning of your weekend. And again, I encourage you, if you can, show up, join us at the table on Sunday. We meet at the Los Fresnos Community Center right here in town. And we are always celebrating Jesus. We always celebrate who he is and what he has done for us. So until then, participate with us here on Facebook and YouTube. And as you enjoy your weekend, remember this, that you are loved. Jesus is constantly giving you his grace. He has you. He promised. Have a good day.